Syracuse takes on Stanford on Friday night at 7:30 inside the Dome. Here is what you need to know about Syracuse's next opponent.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, I know that Syracuse football is on bye right now. They are not playing this Saturday, but guess what? Locked On Syracuse, there are no bye weeks. So guess what? We got a full podcast for you guys today. We're going to talk about the background of Stanford and how they went from a program that was once really good in college football to now one of the worst teams in the FBS. Then we're going to talk about this current Stanford team, the strengths of it and their key players. And then at the end, we're going to get to some of their weaknesses and how Syracuse really should blow out Stanford. And I'm not joking. Kyle McCord should have 700 yards passing against Stanford Friday night at 7:30. Yes, I'm exaggerating, not 700 yards, but you get the idea. Kyle McCord is set to have a field day against Stanford. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. So for some context about Stanford, Syracuse's next opponent on Friday night at 7:30 inside the Dome on ESPN. So a lot of eyeballs are going to be on that game. It's really a chance for Syracuse to show just how good they truly are. Against a Stanford team, really, they should blow out. But anyways, here's some context. Stanford is 1-1 this season, and they were picked dead last in the ACC preseason poll, which, by the way, you can take with a grain of salt because Florida State was picked to finish first in the ACC. They're not very good. I'm actually recording this podcast at the time that all the noon games are starting to kick off, so we'll see how Florida State does against Memphis, and I can't believe that Memphis actually has a chance to win that game. But anyways, Stanford is 1-1. They opened their season at home with a 34-27 loss to TCU. It was a close back-and-forth game, but TCU prevailed. But then Stanford rebounded in week 2, taking down Cal Poly 41-7. But I'll be honest with you, I don't really care what they did against Cal Poly. That's a team that Stanford should blow out, and rightfully so, they did. So most of what I talk about in the second and third segment of this show, it's going to be about what happened in the TCU and Stanford game, less so about what they did against Cal Poly. Stanford is led by second-year head coach Troy Taylor, who is trying to turn around this program. From 2009 to 2018, Stanford was actually one of the premier programs in all of college football, and no, that's not an exaggeration. That's not an exaggeration. From 2009 to 2018, they were a bowl team every single season. And they weren't just a bowl team, because all you got to do is win half your games on your schedule and you make a bowl. All you got to do is go 6-6. And if you schedule a few cupcakes in the non-con, then you only have to win like 2 conference games and you're in a bowl, right? No, but Stanford did a little bit more than that. In every season from 2009 to 2018, this team won at least 8 games. Okay? They were once one of the best programs in college football. And in that span, once again, we're talking about 2009 to 2018, Stanford participated in, get this, 5 New Year's Six bowls. 5 of them. When was the last time Syracuse was in a New Year's Six bowl? I mean, think about that for a second. 5 of them from 2009 to 2018. Incredible run for this Stanford football program. Of course, most of it was from their previous head coach, David Shaw, who, by the way, is the all-time winningest coach in Stanford history. So most of it was from him. Troy Taylor is taking over from David Shaw. And by the way, if you want to know who started the Stanford run, it was Jim Harbaugh. Or John Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh. Yeah, that's right. I always get the Harbaugh brothers confused. I really do. But it was Jim Harbaugh in 2009 and 2010 that really got the program going. And then David Shaw took over and continued that excellence with Stanford. But then all of a sudden, the wheels fell off the program. In 2019, they have a 4-8 season. 2020, they have a 4-2 year, but that was the weird COVID season. And then since then, this has been one of the worst programs in the FBS. So Troy Taylor, the head coach of Stanford, first time. I think it's his second year actually for Stanford. He's got a tall task ahead of him. He really does. Last time I checked, I looked for the odds on this game. I couldn't find them on FanDuel, but I imagine that when the odds do come out for Syracuse and Stanford, that the Orange are going to be at least 2 touchdown favorites, if not more. This is a team that Syracuse should definitely blow out. This was once again Stanford picked to finish dead last in the ACC. Now, having said that, just because they are a bottom feeder within the conference does not mean that Syracuse shouldn't take them seriously. And here's why. We're going to get to their better players later on, and we're going to talk about their weaknesses as well. But in reality, it's because, look, even though they're a bottom feeder within your own conference, they are still within your own conference. They still have talent on their team. And if you don't take them seriously, they can win. All right? I'm not saying this to scare you and suggest that Syracuse is going to lose to Stanford. I don't think they're going to lose to Stanford. I really don't. I think they're going to blow them out. But think about it in Syracuse's favor in 2017 when they knocked off number 2 Clemson inside the dome. And think about all the other times that Syracuse has come up just short of knocking off Clemson, a team that has always had more talent than Syracuse, maybe aside from this season. And think about how many times Syracuse has come close to beating Clemson and actually have beaten them in 2017. What's the point there? Well, look, they're within the same conference. They all have talent. They are all under scholarship. So you have to take them seriously. This is a team that if you do take seriously, you do treat with respect, you're going to kill them. If you don't, if you think you can just walk into the dome on Friday night and you're going to win automatically, no. That's not the case. Okay, that's the case for the following week. When Holy Cross comes to town, with all due respect to Holy Cross, Syracuse is probably going to win that game by 50. With Stanford, look, that's an ACC school. You got to take them seriously, but they were picked to finish dead last within the conference. So Syracuse really shouldn't have many problems with them. Also of note that this is the first time that Syracuse and Stanford are ever going to play each other. Of course, this is the first year that Syracuse and Stanford, I think, are within the same conference of each other. I haven't done too much digging on that, but I imagine this is the first time ever with them both being in the ACC. But I also find it weird because it's not like these programs have existed for a long time. They couldn't have a matchup one time against each other at any point over the last 100+ years. I guess not. But when I did my research on this, I couldn't find a game between Syracuse and Stanford in football. So this is the first time that these two schools are going to play each other. And hopefully Syracuse can end up 1-0 in the all-time series and move to 3-0 in the 2024 season. So that's some brief context for you on the Stanford football program, a team that was once really good, but recently has been one of the worst teams in the FBS. Now, coming up, we're going to talk about the strengths of Stanford and some of their key players to look out for. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn is a tool that I use all the time to find the latest job opportunities. But LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. What are the strengths of Stanford and who are some of their key players? Let's go over perhaps their brightest star, perhaps the guy that is most likely on Stanford to be an NFL player, and that is wide receiver Elic Ayomanor. He is 6'2", 210 pounds. He's a wide receiver and a redshirt sophomore. And in 2023, Ayomanor had 62 catches for over 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. He led Stanford in every single receiving category, and it wasn't even close. For more context on this kid, he had 26 more catches than the next leading receiver on Stanford last year. He had over 600 more yards than the next leading Stanford receiver, and he had 4 more receiving touchdowns than the next leading Stanford wide receiver. So Ayomanor is by far and away the best weapon on Stanford. He is the guy on their team that is most likely going to be playing on Sundays. Ayomanor, keep your eye on him. He is the main outside weapon on Stanford's offense. Now in 2024, Ayomanor was the only Stanford player that was selected to the preseason All-ACC team. The only one. He was the only one on Stanford to make that. And by the way, I have said this with the Syracuse players who were selected. It was Oronde, Gadsden, and Marlowe Wax, that when they released that preseason all-conference team, it was only one team that they released. Just one. So Ayomanor making that shows that he is one of the premier players, not just on Stanford, but in the entire conference. One of the best receivers in the entire conference. And so far this season, he is leading the team with 147 receiving yards, but he has yet to catch a touchdown. And hopefully Syracuse can keep it that way on Friday night. He's got good hands. He can catch the ball in traffic. And oh, by the way, he can take the top off the defense. So you've got to keep an eye on him. If you're the Syracuse defense, that's the guy you really have to key on. He is a future NFL wide receiver. Keep your eye on Elic Ayomanor for Stanford, okay? Secondly, their run defense is surprisingly pretty good. It's good. And I don't really care about what Stanford did against Cal Poly, because what they did against Cal Poly is absolutely demolished their run games. Cal Poly had like 25 total rushing yards on barely over 1 yard per carry. You know it's bad if I'm saying yard per carry and not yards per carry, because if I'm saying yard per carry, that means you only had 1. That's it. But that was against Cal Poly. I don't really care about that. What I do care about is how Stanford did against TCU. And Stanford held TCU to just over 100 yards in the game in total. It was 104 to be exact, but only on 3.1 yards per carry. That's it. So Stanford's run defense was actually really good in that game. And I did check and see and say, okay, well, was it because they sacked the quarterback a lot? Because in college football, it's so wacky with the stats and everything that they're like, hey, if you sack the quarterback, that counts against the team's rushing yards, even though it really shouldn't. In the NFL, they don't count sacks toward a team's rushing yards. But in college football, they do. Stanford only had 1 sack in the game. And unless that sack went for like a 30-yard loss, then that 3.1 yards per carry is a pretty accurate number of how Stanford did against TCU's running game. They were pretty solid overall. And really, it's not so much their defensive line, it is their line linebacker unit. That is the backbone of Stanford's defense. It is headlined by Tristan Sinclair and Gaethan Bernadel. Those two players are the main catalysts on Stanford defense, patrolling the middle of the field. So their linebacker unit is really the strength of their defense. They are among the leaders already on Stanford in tackles and in tackles for loss. So those are some of the strengths and the key players on Stanford. Once again, on offense, it's that big wide receiver, 6'2", 210 pounds, Elic Ayomanor, preseason All-ACC, had 1,000 yards receiving last year on a pretty crummy Stanford team. Think about that. Over 1,000 yards on that team last year. I think they went like 3-9 or whatever. Elic Ayomanor on offense and the linebackers on Stanford's defense combined with their run defense overall. So, look, we're going to get to their weaknesses in just a second. Can Syracuse run the ball against Stanford? They probably will be able to do it, but maybe not at the efficiency that you would like. This is a game, because coming up, I'm going to tell you that this is a game where, once again, expect Kyle McCord to absolutely pick apart this defense. Absolutely pick apart them. So coming up, how Syracuse can exploit Stanford, and I already pretty much gave you the answer. It's their secondary. It's pretty bad. Fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. And what are you waiting for? Syracuse is on bye right now with 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week. You always have new flavors to explore. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 and use code LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code LockedOnCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Kyle McCord is going to have an absolute field day against this Stanford secondary. He is going to shred them. Kyle McCord shredded Ohio. He shredded Georgia Tech. And he's going to do the same thing for the third consecutive week. Because Stanford's weakness, at least so far this season, has been their pass defense. It is not very good. Again, I don't care what happened against Cal Poly. To me, I pretty much throw that away. I do not care about what happened. What happened against TCU? Well, they could not stop the pass. They made Josh Hoover look like Joe Montana. Josh Hoover went 28 of 42 for 353 yards and 2 touchdowns and did not have an interception in the game. TCU in that game had 2 wide receivers finish with over 100 yards, and they had another pass catcher finish with over 80 yards. Think about that for a second. Stanford's pass defense, no bueno. Not good. Bad. Terrible. All right, I'm going to throw out all the words there. But anyways, as a team, TCU had once again over 350 passing yards in the game on 8.4 yards per attempt. Now, you guys might be asking yourselves, what's the context behind 8.4 yards per attempt? Is that good? Is that bad? Well, let me tell you, based on Kyle McCord's numbers to start this season. We all agree that Kyle McCord is off to a great start through 2 weeks. Kyle McCord's passing yards per attempt this season, 8.6 so far. That's where he's at. Stanford gave up 8.4 yards per attempt against TCU. So they're pretty similar to each other. What does that tell you? Kyle McCord and this offense are going to have an absolute field day picking apart Stanford. That is their big weakness. It is their secondary. Now, I do have to give Stanford a little bit of props here because they do have one really good player in the secondary, and that's Colin Wright. In 2023, Colin Wright, a cornerback, was Pac-12 honorable mention for the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. I know it's kind of a mouthful to say. He was the freshman Pac-12 honorable mention Defensive Player of the Year. So basically, to summarize that for you, Colin Wright, number 6, a cornerback, is pretty good. How about that? Does that make a little bit more sense than trying to pronounce that, or not pronounce, but try to say that whole mouthful? I think it does, but whatever. This is just another game where Kyle McCord should go for over 300, over 400, whatever it is. It would be the first 400-yard game in a Syracuse uniform for Kyle McCord, probably in his actual career, because, yeah, it is in his career. Kyle McCord's never had a 400-yard passing day in college football to date. Never had, because in week 1, he set a career high against Ohio, and I believe he had like 350 in that game, and he had more against Georgia Tech, so he set another career high. Could this be 3 consecutive weeks that Kyle McCord sets a career high? I think it could be. I think it could. I would expect huge games from Oronde Gadsden and Trebor Pena once again, because those two control the middle of the field. Stanford really doesn't have anyone in the secondary that could stop those two. So expect another big performance from Oronde Gadsden and Trebor Pena. So Syracuse really should not have much trouble throwing the ball against Stanford. They really shouldn't. They shouldn't. Now, run defense, as I said, Stanford's is actually not bad through 2 weeks. So is LaQuinn Allen going to have 100 yards on the ground for the first time this season? I'm not going to say no, he can't. But I think the game plan for Syracuse this week is like, look, this secondary is not very good. You got a quarterback this year that can fire it all over down the field. You have so many weapons. Use them. This is the game where I say, make it an aerial assault. Do it. They can't really stop it, right? That's what Syracuse should do this week. Throw the ball a ton, because I don't think Stanford can stop it. Period. Now, as far as overall thoughts on the game, and I know it's early, this isn't necessary. I mean, it could be. This could be a game where we see more young players, but I'm kind of hesitant to say that. And when I say young players, I mean like backups and some true freshmen like Jamie Tremble or Emmanuel Ross, and maybe Michael Johnson Jr. at quarterback instead of Kyle McCord. But that would only be a scenario if Syracuse is just throttling Stanford this week. Hopefully they do. This is the type of game where it is possible that Syracuse can get out to such a big margin that you start to see a lot of young players and a lot of backups play for Syracuse. It is possible it could be one of those games. King Joseph Edwards hasn't really done much so far, and he's a true freshman 4-star recruit. Maybe this could be a game that he has a breakout because Syracuse goes up by 40 points in the fourth quarter. But at the same time, I am hesitant on it. And it goes back to what I said at the very beginning of the podcast, that, look, is this Stanford team good? They're not good. No, I'm blunt. All right? They're not very good. But they are within your own conference, and you do have to handle your own business with a team in your own conference. They still have athletes. They are still under scholarship. They are still being paid. All right? But next week is really the week where we are going to see a lot of young players and a lot of backups. When Holy Cross comes to town, I'm so excited to watch more of Emmanuel Ross. He's a 4-star wide receiver. Jamie Tremble, the 4-star tight end. King Joseph Edwards, the 4-star edge rusher. All of those guys, because Syracuse is going to just absolutely mop Holy Cross. They will. So that's the game where I 100% expect we're going to see young players and backups. For Stanford, definitely possible, but I'm just a little hesitant only because it's a team within our own conference. All right? So what we went over on the podcast today, we went over the background of Stanford, how they went from one of the premier programs in college football 2, not very good recently. Their strengths and weaknesses on the team overall. We talked about some of their key players. Even when they do have a weakness, they do have a really good player in Colin Wright in the secondary. We talked about their NFL wide receiver that they have in Elic Ayomanor. Their linebacker unit is actually pretty good. Is this a game that Syracuse should win by a lot? Yes. Once again, Stanford and Syracuse playing inside the Dome on Friday night at 7:30. Thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. For your second listen, go to Locked On College Football. From NIL deals to never-ending conference realignment rumors, and we just had some more conference realignment recently. Spencer McLaughlin has you covered this season on the gridiron. Find Locked On College Football on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And folks, I hope you enjoy your college football Saturday. Syracuse football is off, but Locked On Syracuse is not. So everyone, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, click that like button. And if you really liked it, subscribe to the channel, turn on those notifications so you know right away when I am dropping the next podcast. And everyone, take care.